Joe Alba, welcome to Suit Up the Podcast.
What's going on, guys? It's really amazing to be here. My name is Joe Alba. I'm the creator of the Raider series, and I'm here on Suit Up to talk about books, about adventure, and about what it means to be an adventurer in the modern times that we got going on right now.
I think that that's one of the go-to, like, I don't want to say difficulties, but the first thing to ever overcome when writing an adventure story today is what is adventure now? Because, like, it's easy to think of like the 1940s and earlier 1930s where it's like, oh, yeah, they don't have GPS. And like that
Right.
alone creates adventure. Whereas now, with all technology available, making something an adventurous, globetrotting thing is just different.
Oh yeah, I totally understand, and I think that was one of the major hurdles in my story as well because the Raider series is, it's kind of my baby. It's kind of
Mhm.
everything that I've ever loved in storytelling compacted into one. And this was formulated honestly over years. And
Mhm.
I'm a Navy veteran,
Hmm.
so
Thank
I
you for your
was.
service.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Um, so I served from 2017 to 2022.
Hmm.
2017 was all training. 2018, I went to Okinawa, Japan,
Oh, wow.
and I lived there for 3 years. And I got
That makes so much sense because you have a chapter about Okinawa in Yamashita's Treasure. And when you read it, I'm like, I feel like this is a place that Joe has been and spent quality time because it just
Mhm.
reads in such a way where, like, oh, yeah, he has fond memories of this place.
Oh yeah. Fun fact: the last chapter taking place in Sammy's Bar, is a real place that you can go to, and we didn't go to it often because it's very much a very formal setting. It's very low key, but it's definitely you're there for to drink in a more sophisticated sense.
Hmm.
So we always enjoyed that. But yeah, I spent 3 years in Okinawa. During that time, I went to Thailand
Hmm.
for operational exercises. I never went to combat. Um, Went to Thailand, then I went to the Philippines.
Hmm.
The Philippines is where the whole Yamashita's treasure kind of came to be because, I'd heard about the myths and stories. Then I let it formulate.
And I'm genuinely curious because I'd never heard about Yamashita's treasure before. Like until I don't know, we got about maybe a quarter into the story, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, is this real? Like, did this actually happen? And I looked up, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. Like, can you give just a little background for the audience what this is and how you came across it?
So interesting story about how I came across it. So during World War II, while the Japanese were expanding and the Nazi Germans were expanding, there was a definite need for resources in order to fund this war machine for both sides. Now, Nazi Germany has been covered in a lot of fiction.
Hmm.
All fans of Indiana Jones. Um, if you ever seen Monuments Men,
Hmm.
yeah. Um, so they've been able to, really delve into Nazi Germany. But the other thing was Imperial Japan,
Hmm.
and there was this aggressive expansion in Southeast Asia. So places like Vietnam, Thailand, Laos. Those places used to be called, was it French Indochina,
That's
uh,
right.
Burma, and Siam.
Hmm.
I think they changed it somewhere around that time to Thailand. But
I always forget just how much the map has changed just since World War II, and I'm like, holy cow.
but so General Yamashita was led by Prince Chichibu, who was part of the royal family of Imperial Japan. He was sent out to basically take over, and anything worth value, whether that be religious or rare minerals, it was taken from these lands and uh, sent back to Japan. And there was historical documents that say that some of that treasure is in the Philippines. Um, there's an actual story that someone did find a large portion of the treasure, but I
Oh.
guess it was returned back to the government of the Philippines.
Hmm.
So you didn't get to keep all of it. But apparently, there's other caches, and there was I think it's either Nat Geo or History Channel that did um, almost like a documentary
Hmm.
exploration. They sent a few guys over there, and they found a lot of hidden tunnels and bunkers. I don't know if they found any of the treasure, but they did find cyanide gas, and,
Oh.
which is why that's in the book.
Hmm.
Um, I actually came upon it because I don't know how well versed you are in video games.
Very, very like I recognize the names of a lot of them and know the
Right.
general stories, but like if you ask me about game Uncharted number five, I'd be like, no clue. I know Uncharted exists.
Not exactly. Um, but no, there's a game called Medal of Honor Rising Sun, and there's a level based around um, the hunt for Yamashita's treasure in World War
Oh,
II.
cool.
And I played this game when I was 8 or 9 years old. And
You're
that was
preparing
like,
from a young age.
exactly, it was always stuck in my head. And then when I went to the Philippines, I was like, oh, maybe there is something there. But fast forwarding, I lived there for 3 years, and I spent the last year of my time in the Navy in Virginia, in Middle
Hmm.
Creek, Virginia. And that's actually the base where the East Coast Navy SEALs
Mm.
reside in.
Hmm.
But I was very far away from them. Went to I worked at Boone Clinic, which is
Hmm.
where the security company in the book comes
Oh, uh-huh.
from. You know, grinded it out, but I also worked on my college degree.
Hmm.
And I'd work 8 hours filling prescriptions. It's not what my job would be when I was in Okinawa, because I was
Hmm.
assigned to a Marine Corps unit. I did a lot of Marine Corps things with them. I got transferred back to Boone Clinic in West Virginia, or East by Virginia Beach. My apologies. Um, and I grinded out for 8 hours filling prescription medications. Not the most glamorous job in the world. Um, and then the next 4 or 5 hours would be spent getting my degree in political science.
Oh, cool.
Um, I wrote a lot every week, essays, and by the end of the year, I got my degree, graduated, all that stuff, and I was like, what if I could do something for myself?
Hmm.
And I'd always had an interest in creative writing. I started writing when I was in elementary school, um, and I found out what Amazon KDP was,
Hmm.
and I found out that you can make some money off of this, and you can have a lifestyle based around writing books, and you don't need a publisher. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I could try that out. And I suppose I should go into how this book was created. Uh,
Yes. It's a great premise. I just have to throw it out there real quick because I sat down as I'm reading it. The story's getting going. I'm like, this feels like everything I do love about adventure. It feels Indiana Jones. It feels Tomb Raider. It feels like Tom Clancy. It's got, I didn't think about it until you mentioned it, but it also has a bit of like the video game vibe to it.
mhm.
And I think it just really fits as adventure in a modern context. So yes, please, where did it start to circulate? You've had some of the ideas, it sounds like, for a while, but
Yeah.
how did it come into this?
So it originally started as it was going to be take place in the 60s, and
Hmm.
Jack Carter, which fun fact was a um, it was a character I created when I wrote in elementary school.
Oh, that's
Jack has
awesome.
been, yeah, Jack has always been a very masculine name for me, a very adventurous name.
Hmm.
And Carter comes from Howard Carter,
Mm-hmm.
the person who found King Tut's tomb. And it was going to be Jack Carter, maybe 50s, 60s. He's a Southern man. He wine, dines, intertwines, and then he blows the place up before he gets out of there. But I was like, at the time, I during my time in Okinawa, I made two really good friends who were also corpsmen, and I felt that there was something else I could do with the
Hmm.
character instead of making it one person. What if I made it a team based around a very loose novelization of the people that I know and love?
Hmm.
Uh, Maria is based on my now wife. Um, Carlos was based on, I don't know if I should say that.
That's
But I
okay.
mean, Carlos is based on my friend Chris, and Salazar, or my friend Salazar is based on Sal. They're all very loose interpretations of people that I was very close to.
Hmm.
I think that team dynamic very much changed how
Hmm.
the story was going to go, where no one person was good at everything.
Hmm.
And it meant that you had to rely on other people in order to accomplish this adventure. Um, so, for the audience, Jack Carter is a ex recon marine. He's a very specially trained person, but he's never seen combat. That's one thing he's always been wanting to do. It's his purpose to make this world a better place. Um, and he never got that ability to do that because this is not only a post 9/11 book, but a post you know Afghanistan withdrawal
Hmm.
book. This is, and now we're in the 2020s. We're in a time of incredible deconstruction and postmodernism.
Yes.
That's
You did a great job illustrating that in the book with Jack being in a classroom and people just, and I'm saying there like, what's sad is it almost reads like satire, but you're reading, I'm like, the thing is, I know this, like, you can talk to someone on the street and potentially have the same conversation. This
oh yeah,
isn't just heightened for storytelling purposes. This is actually the conversations people are seriously having.
right. And I think the biggest thing is, you know, this book is about bringing modern chivalric masculine ideals to a
Hmm.
world that's kind of lost all that. Um, I don't mean to get pessimistic on that, but I mean, you deconstruct. We're in a world where we deconstruct Indiana Jones, and I saw that
Hmm.
episode on where he talked to somebody about Dial of Destiny.
Hmm.
Um, I think I probably would have torn that thing to shreds, but because I have such a love for that character,
Hmm.
and that deconstructionist, you know, being a great grand adventurer leads you into being depressed, divorced, and your son dies. And I'm like, that's not the only thing that's happened to modern heroes. Bruce
Hmm.
Willis is Die Hard had the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, was it Rambo?
Hmm.
I never
And the
saw.
last Rambo one I heard is still pretty hardcore on
Okay, you might be
Rambo's
right.
vibes. That's just what
Yeah,
I've heard. I haven't seen it, but you are very correct. Unfortunately, this is the trend. Like we have set up our heroes and we've turned around far enough that now it's like, oh, but what if Luke Skywalker was really sad and embittered?
Luke Skywalker. That's another good one. That's the one I was forgetting. Luke Skywalker and Han Solo. They just
Yeah.
copied and pasted the backstory of sequel Han Solo and put it into Indiana Jones and switched the names. You ever
It
get that?
it just slays me that this is what happened, especially with Indiana Jones, because
I know.
I understand that we need to have like I don't mind heroes not having happy endings sometimes.
Right.
But I mean that's just part of life. The
Yeah.
flip side being, but when that's what every story has become, it just feels repetitive and tiring and quite frankly unoriginal because it's more like they don't know how to create something new at this point. And I say they very loosely, like just the Hollywood industrial machine.
Right.
Screenwriters that are probably overworked and um, under overworked, overeducated, and under creative are trying desperately to come up with a way of making something interesting. And so their thought is, well, what if we pick it apart? No, please
Exactly.
stop.
And I mean, the economics of Hollywood have kind of made it very scary to do
Hmm.
anything creative. Um, this is a post-COVID world. People are not going to the movie theaters anymore,
Hmm.
and if they do go to the theaters, it has to be a flagship franchise that everyone knows. It has to be an event movie.
Hmm.
One of the few movies that made over $1 billion last year was Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about that film.
It's actually, I've debated doing an episode on the podcast about because I think that it's not a good movie. It's a fun watch.
It's a fun
But
watch. Yeah,
the thing is, like, it's not a plot. It's literally a series of vignettes where you have Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman like taking shots at each other. That's literally it.
yeah. I do consider because going back to the first Deadpool, it was such a tight
Hmm.
film
Yes.
with $60 million budget, which is unheard of nowadays. And then you go into the third one, and there's a lot of homework you have to do
Hmm.
before you watch this. You have to
Did you
watch.
remember who Elektra was?
I'm very much into the whole podcasts about movies and stuff like that, so I'm always watching and keeping up to date with more modern films.
Hmm.
So I did know who Electra was, but again, that is such a
Such a deep cut from a very specific
yeah.
time in movie history.
And then you'd also have to know that Channing Tatum was supposed
Yes.
to be Gambit, but then
Yes.
never became a movie, and you have to know what that is.
Hmm.
And then my dad he was a huge fan of the first two Deadpools, and he's like, "Should I watch the third one?" And I'm like, "Have you seen Loki? Do you know what any of that whole TVA stuff is? Because if you don't, you're gonna be
Very confused very
lost."
quickly.
And but anyways, back to what we were talking about.
I do want to make a quick comment since we were talking about movies and transitioning into talking about the Raiders team again.
Mhm.
The one of the things I think you did a really great job in talking about making it a team, an ensemble,
Mhm.
is that's what makes the mummy work.
Oh
And
my
that's
god,
one of the things that I immediately picked up on reading Yamashita's Treasure is you have a team, an ensemble cast that allows you to just do more than if it's
yeah,
just one solo hero. Like I love my Indiana Jones, I love my James Bond. The reality is because the cast around them tends to be fairly anemic, it just
right.
reduces the amount of story you can kind of tell. And that's why you get like right now, James Bond, everyone's like, oh, we need to do the Moneypenny Diaries because if
Oh my god,
we need to build up like the people around him so we can do more IP stuff rather than simply just creating more stories. But when you have a nice ensemble cast, people really, I think that to a certain extent, we all understand that community is important. And so we're always searching for our team and our ensemble, which, given your military background, makes sense that this is something you would resonate with and write about.
right. And you know, I should probably get back to the actual Raider team because I
Yeah,
did want to talk about the Amazon merger. Maybe if I'm invited again, we'll talk about that. But so Jack Carter, he's considered to be, the team leader. I base this, you can kind of think of as a um, there's something called a Special Forces Operational Detachment Alpha,
Hmm.
and that's a team of 12 men, and there's specific jobs for each of them. And I just recently thought about this, but Jack Carter is the team leader. He's the 18 Zulu, is what the people in special forces would call him, and he's in charge of being on the ground. And he has Carlos, who is the comedic relief, but he's also the medic. And I
Hmm.
think that people get around stories is comedic relief has to be incompetent.
Hmm.
Uh, as much as he is, as Carlos is he's a bit of a player. He doesn't take moments too seriously. In the scene where his contract manager gets hit with bullets,
Hmm.
able to like get into
No worries.
he's get into the fight, and he's able to take care of what he needs to take care of medically in order to save this person's life. And I think there's a great dichotomy in Carlos.
Hmm.
Sal is he's an ex Bortac agent. The reason why I did Bortac is the Border Patrol tactical unit, and they're not there to just guard the border. They're there to like really get the bad guys um, who are crossing in. And he's very much the serious type.
Hmm.
He's very much like he's like the weapons sergeant on a going back to the metaphor about a special forces team. Um, he's able to manipulate weapons, and he's the sharpshooter, and he's also the driver. He's a very good driver. And Maria would be the intelligence uh,
Hmm.
representative, or the intelligence sergeant, as they call him. She's the brains of the team.
Hmm.
Uh, a lot of people would probably compare her to Evie uh,
Hmm.
from The Mummy, but I prefer her to be more like Sharon Stone from Alan Quartermain.
Yes.
That's a joke. I just recently saw your episode of Men's Adventure Fiction and the Alan Quartermain thing, and I had to watch that.
Oh, you were. I'm so glad you did. It's such a treat.
But
So
I was
much
like,
better than it deserves to be.
um, but yeah, she's definitely the brains. She's the only one that's not connected to the military or law enforcement community, and I
Hmm.
think that brings a little bit more of a dynamic amongst them,
Hmm.
um, especially because I don't know if I'm going to get canceled for this. There's a uptick in girl boss characters who can do
Hmm.
everything,
Yes.
and I wanted to create a strong, independent woman, um, but not a completely Superman
Yeah.
heroine who can do everything, doesn't need to take any advice from anybody. Um, she, she has her own ego. She has her own pride. She needs to find this ancient artifact that has a lot of power, even though not it nobody else believes her. Um, but she's so dedicated and passionate about that. But she also needs to kind of listen to other people, not just as the patriarchy, but as an actual
Hmm.
team
Yeah.
dynamic. Um, and then there's Jason Stray, who
Hmm.
would probably be the the captain of this entire thing. And in retrospect, it comes a little bit later in the story,
He makes
but
a mark though when he shows up.
yeah, and he's my version of like Aragorn,
Hmm.
or he's the epitome of what I think masculinity should be, but he's not as other you know military thrillers or spy thrillers. He's not a gruff, growling man growling grimly.
Hmm.
He has moments of levity. He has care for other people, and he has a charisma around him that is actually needed when you're a CIA paramilitary operations officer. A lot of that is, yeah, you're doing black ops and stuff like that, but you're also, you need to build connections
Hmm.
in order to do that. And I got a lot of information from the books that I've read about the CIA and the paramilitary operations that have gone on since the CIA's creation. And I always thought that that was fascinating.
I don't think that
And
people appreciate enough spycraft at its core is relationship building.
exactly.
Most of the time we think of it because like James Bond films aren't really hard in spycraft. Usually it's
Right.
detective work in the actual books, and then the films are like the big bombastic things, but it's building a network and building connections, which is why like having a CIA operative who actually has charisma as a human being is a valuable asset.
Right. And when it comes to James Bond's, Daniel Craig, Casino Royale, and Skyfall, and the other movies as well. They're really good. But
Hmm.
would you want to go to a bar with him? Would you want to sit and have a drink with him, or else, or
I
would it
will
be
say that is the one thing though that I think worked the best in No Time to Die. The scene where he and Felix are at the bar and just like playing bar games. That is the one specific shining moment I can say for Daniel Craig's Bond that I feel like
right?
he feels the most human that he does, like even more than him losing the love of his life. I feel like that makes him the most grounded that I've ever seen him as a person. Just
Oh
weirdly
yeah,
enough, that's the one scene that I think is my favorite in No Time to Die.
yeah. And don't get me wrong, like before in Casino Royale, before Vesper dies, he is a very charismatic person. He smiles. You believe that he's able to seduce the wife of a terrorist financer. But after that hits, like you believe
Hmm.
it. Like, you believe like he would probably be very grounded, very a gruff, growling man, growling grimly. Um, but when it comes to an intelligence officer or
Hmm.
paramilitary intelligence officer, um, I would say someone like Pierce Brosnan or even Timothy Dalton.
Hmm.
Well, he did two movies, but he was very charismatic and very caring.
Hmm.
In the opening scene of License to Kill, when he's at Felix's wedding,
Hmm.
that's a little bit more like I believe that they have a friendship,
That they're
and
actual people.
that they're actual people, and that James Bond cares about another man. Like, um, because when what was it? Jeffrey Wright plays Felix, and Daniel Craig
Hmm.
is opposite. You don't get that sense, especially in was it Quantum of
Quantum,
Solace?
Quantum of Solace is like such a nosedive after Casino Royale. It's
I,
anyway.
like I get it because it came during the time of the writer's strike,
Hmm.
and I guess they were refilming that and trying to reshoot it. Um, it had potential. It
Hmm.
very much reminded me. I don't read a lot of James Bond books. I'm gonna be honest, but I did read a little bit of Carte Blanche.
Ooh, yep.
It had a very modern, very realistic style to it, and I think James Bond could probably benefit from that in the future. Um, Maybe not the next direction for where it's
Hmm.
going right now. I think you could do with a little bit more fantastical elements. But that's just a personal opinion. So yeah, that dynamic when I'm writing it comes from the people that I know. Again, it's a very loose novelization. It's not a one for one kind of thing, but
I
when
don't
it
know if you hear this as a writer, but sometimes when people are like, oh, who is this person in, say, a book, especially since I've written two romance novels, which of course has occasionally led to people going, so who's this person in the book?
okay,
In which case the response is the same for writing any adventure novel, which is characters are composites. Like, yes, there's some people where you're like, oh yeah, there's clearly a degree to which this person made me think of this character, but there's so much that wraps into. It's not like it's the sun also rises and we're playing Hemingway and just basically ripping off our friends' lives.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so it's a novelization, I guess you would call it. Um, but when I'm, crafting the distinction and the relationship between Jack and Maria, um, it does have that kind of vibe that I have with my own wife.
Hmm.
It's very playful, but it's also very passionate.
Hmm.
But um,
So
um,
what was the writing process like for you when you started working on the book?
oh, that's a good question. So I took 2022 to write it. I was doing other things at the time, but I still had that passion and that ability that I could create a good story. And I'd chip away at it, and then I'd stop for a couple months, and then I'd come
Hmm.
back to it. And with what everyone was saying on, oh my God, Amazon KDP, it'll create great wealth for you, and people will get your story. So I was like super excited. And when I posted it, and when it came along online, I had a following on Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that. And I looked at the sales chart the next day, and there was nothing. And that's the thing about being a self-published author is you have to have an entrepreneurial mindset
Hmm.
on top of a creative mindset. You're creating a product that you're trying to sell to other people. And I'm listening to this other guy called Alex Ramosi. Do you know
Hmm.
who he is? He has
I haven't followed his stuff, but I've heard about him through the Zeitgeist and other people that.
right. He talks about this cycle of entrepreneurship, which is you have that hopeful optimism
Hmm.
where this is great. Um, I'm gonna change the world with this. I'm gonna tell a great story, and then you have that realistic pessimism,
Hmm.
which is buying this, nobody cares. This is stupid. I should just stop this. And I'm not gonna say I overcame that overnight. I was definitely hopping between the optimism and the pessimism. Um, but I went back and I was writing the second book at that time, but I took a look back at the original story and I was like, this could be worked on. So you don't actually have the first edition of
Okay.
the first edition is actually right here. No, this was the first edition, and it was when I went to look back at it, I was like, it's not, it's not it. So I went back. I, the great thing about having no sales of your book is you can change it and nobody would notice. um, so I went back and I changed a few things. I added a lot more to it. I changed the prologue. The
Hmm.
prologue was it was actually OSS members, the actual military members going after a convoy um, to get Yamashita's treasure. And then I changed it because I think it better suited it as a very common pulp adventure. It's in the
Hmm.
40s. You have all
Yeah.
these academics
Hmm.
who are kind of, it's World War II, they're kind of pushed into doing paramilitary things that they honestly don't have any experience with. And in the prologue, it's not a spoiler. It's the first thing you read.
Hmm.
It doesn't end well. Um, I also changed the gun that Jason Stray gives to Jack Carter. It was originally a M1911,
Hmm.
which, funny story, came from um, back in high school. I did film,
Uh-huh.
and I had a YouTube channel and everything like that. And I had an airsoft M1911, and I played Jack Carter in that. And I decided to change it to the revolver to the M1917.
Hmm.
And what that is the Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's the pistol that Indiana Jones has.
Oh, cool.
And I was able to have enough money to afford a audiobook narrator.
Hmm.
And Stephen Dalton, he did an amazing job. He he's an Irishman,
Oh,
uh,
that's cool.
actually, and he was able to do an American accent. Um, and he's also able to do a lot of the Spanish and Tagalog that's in the book as well,
Oh,
which is
wow.
a little difficult, but especially for an Irishman, having to like switch over from American and then into uh, Spanish language. Um, I thought I did a really good job, and I was like, he had the updated script. I reposted and updated it again, and then I found out my wife was pregnant.
Congratulations.
So this was back in 2023,
Hmm.
and I had to buckle down and find an actual job. Um, so I put the Raider series on pause, but um, I fought, or I didn't fight with my wife, but I argued that I was having a son,
Hmm.
really wanted him to be named Jack, and I was able to get it.
Congratulations. That's
Like, no, we're
awesome.
not naming our son after your character. But I was like, but also my mom's father's original name was Jack, so we can name him after that.
There
And I
we
was like,
go.
all right. Um, but there's a little bit of nominative determinism being named Jack because I created a character named
Hmm.
Jack Carter, who's a very heroic and determined person, and that's definitely what I want to give to him. I want to give him a masculine purpose, and I want to raise him right. Um, but I also wanted to raise him believing in himself.
Hmm.
How do you get your kid to believe in himself when you yourself have given up on your dreams? So you can't give up. I decided, I can't give up on my dreams. I
Hmm.
have to see this through in order to make sure that he knows that he can accomplish his dreams on his own. Um, so that's when I started to get back into it. I took a look at my second book. That also needed a little bit of fixing. So I fixed that back up. Um, and now I'm on this push to definitely get this story out there
Hmm.
to other people because I truly believe that people will enjoy this.
Hmm. It's a great read and a great adventure.
I appreciate that.
I also, one of the things that I made as a note because I thought was really cool is I've seen you've been making memes on
Yes.
your Instagram page and just memes as marketing. Very neat. When did you start doing that?
Um, so, it's part of that entrepreneurial process. You have a product, but if nobody knows it, it's not going to sell. Nobody's going to find out what it is. Um, so I played around with a few things. One thing is having voiceover excerpts with
Hmm.
pictures. And you've probably seen that. Um, Trailers for the books. And then, I'd always created memes in my spare time, especially when I was in the Navy.
Hmm.
I was with the Marines. I had my own, Snapchat. I don't have that anymore, but you know, whenever something would happen, I create a meme about it, laugh about it, um, and I just decided, hey, why not bring that into my marketing? We're already bringing something familiar, which is a meme, and we're tailoring it to something to the product, to the story,
Hmm.
generate intrigue as to what I'm talking about. Um, so I think playing around with it, and I saw you created a meme as well. It was uh, the guy from WWE.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like that's
I
gonna
I'll
be
be
hilarious.
honest, you helped inspire me. I saw it the other day. I was like, wait a minute, I think I still have Mathematic. And I just started playing around with it because if for nothing else, it's a fascinating form of expression where it's almost like a cartoon to a certain extent, especially I created another one that I'll post sometime within the next couple of weeks. That's like the Gru plan.
Mhm.
And it's wonderful because it's like four scenes and it's like a cartoon where you have the four panels of setup and then the punchline, which that's kind of how a nice meme works is you have setup, punchline. And I don't know, as someone that read Peanuts growing up as a kid, I've always loved the concept.
Oh yeah, like the newspaper comics that
Hmm.
I don't know if they exist anymore.
Actually, that's sad. Like you're
Yeah,
so right. That's like a This is one of the things I found interesting about seeing with using just KDP as an example. The writing and publishing world has evolved so much
right.
that I'm always wondering, like you touched on the idea of pulp recently in our
Mhm.
conversation. Just pulp was a form and a medium that was around for a distinct period of time. You had the short story as a very commercially successful thing for a period of time. Novels and books have definitely had more staying power than most other forms of media. But I'm always curious, like, what's that next evolution that steps in? Because a lot of times writers of adventure fiction like us would be publishing small things in these like small adventure magazines for years before then the novel comes out, or they would be eventually be collected into the novel. But there don't seem to be those types of outlets anymore.
Yeah. Especially with the concept of digital media,
Hmm.
um, the lack of physical media in other forms, such as video games, movies, TV shows as well, is you know if the server for whatever streaming service, whether that be Amazon, Netflix, Disney Plus, if they don't have it, you don't have it. Um, we're also seeing that, especially in the video gaming world, where if they take it off the store, there's no backwards compatibility. So if you wanted to play something in your childhood and they don't have it, you're not getting it. Even if you had a physical copy, you would have to play it on an older system because they're getting rid of disk drives.
Hmm. Oh yeah,
And
like so weird to think about. You can nine times out of ten, the computer you'll buy today has no disk drive, whereas
right,
like that was the thing for so long.
I know, and I think that's counterproductive to the maintenance of the art that we create because at the end
Hmm.
of the day this is an artistic format, and if we can't preserve the history of art, one, we'll be condemned to repeat our mistakes. If it, even if it was a bad thing, we'd be condemned to repeat our mistakes. But if it's a good thing, we don't have that story.
Hmm.
Imagine, I mean, I remember Disney Plus had the Indiana Jones films,
Hmm.
and then they lost them. They only had Diary of Destiny on there. I was like, what is this? I think it went back to Amazon. And if you only had Disney Plus, you're not going to see it.
Hmm.
Up to the lawyers and the executives running these things in order to get it back for the masses to see. Um, but yeah, I think the great thing about books is they're mostly on paper, unless
Hmm.
obviously that on ebook or audiobook. But
That's
I
honestly the thing that's
do.
the roughest for me is the audiobook. Because like you and I have talked about this before, I'm a big audiobook junkie. There's some
Mhm.
the new James Bond books. They did a complete re-recording of the audiobook versions.
Oh, really?
I have most of the original ones, or at least randomly, this is a complete side comment for you in the audience. There was this great audiobook narrator named David Rintoul. He had a Scottish voice, and he did a great reading of the James Bond novels that was not commercially available, has not been commercially available for a long time. I went like down through message boards online to have someone. I sent him like $50 on PayPal and he sent me a thumb drive with recordings from an audio cassette that he digitized that I was able to find. But to my point, there's a guy in Australia, he tried downloading, he bought the like last versions of the audiobooks. They deleted them when the new ones came out, and he has not been able to access the ones he paid for. It's just horrifying.
And I mean, probably the most famous of these cases has to be, the Star Wars that probably kicked it off. You can't buy the original 1977
Hmm.
theatrical versions anymore. Uh,
Hmm.
you can't. You have to find the holiday special. Um, it's just as hidden as Yamashita's treasure. Um, but yeah, it's a detriment to people who want to. It's a detriment to people everywhere. I think stories are meant to be told and they're meant to be maintained. That's
Hmm.
before any actual media happened. People found it as important to maintain stories. So ancient civilizations had storytellers that
Hmm.
would collect the stories and either give it to or tell them to the next person in line and be able to tell those stories so that they could exist for a long period of time.
Hmm. Okay, to that point, that's one of the reasons I was excited to see you have the version one of Yamashita's treasure still,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that stuff like that is just fascinating to be able to have those revisions. When I don't know about you, but when I'm writing and I do like a major rewrite, what I like to do, even though I'm like copying them off and saving them somewhere, but I do like duplicate the file and edit the copy instead of the previous version because there's a part of me that loves that idea of just maintaining this was the evolution of the story and the idea.
Right. Now, actually, I had a question.
Hmm.
Um, so, to the audience, I read One Man's Treasure, and you know, it's obviously a different book, but with a few similarities. It's definitely a modern adventure like a classic pulp adventure taking place in the modern time.
Hmm.
Uh, but one thing that I noted was what people's taste in alcohol, your character's taste in alcohol, says about the person. And you know, obviously, I don't drink as much as I used to because I have a kid. Um, but yeah, I'd be very fascinated in the culture and the taste of different alcohols. That's why Sammy's
You
bar,
included that in your book very well too, by the way.
right? And what could you say about a character like Sam? He drinks the vodka martini shaken, not stirred, and it says a lot about how he was very much on, you know, he was very much into the adventure for adventure's sake, and I like that. He, you know, and I think the part where Sam goes out into the jungle by himself, I think that's the perfect metaphor for the entrepreneurial process.
Yes.
You take your bag, you go out, you're like, I'm gonna find the treasure, I'm gonna, sell this story, this product, I'm gonna have a great time, I'm gonna be super successful right off the bat. And just like Sam, he gets crushed by nature. And but was it Dixon? He's a straight shooter, and that's why he likes you know, it was a Scotch.
Single malt Scotch. I'm pretty certain it's Macallan. I can't remember if I specify what year or not.
I think he did. Um, but that kind of proves that he's a very, straight to the point. Like, when we drink whiskey, we're very. It's a bit of masochism in that.
Hmm.
It, people who drink whiskey are very much into the strength
Hmm.
of the drink. Um, and I think that's a very interesting tell for your characters as to what they drink determines a little bit of who they are.
Hmm. Well, I think that that's part of what makes good storytelling. As you
Yeah,
know, putting a character in a point of decision and how they choose to make that decision says speaks to who they are. Have you ever seen Lessons from the Screenplay?
is that the YouTube
Yeah, the
series?
YouTube channel.
Yeah, I've seen a few of them.
They did one on James Bond and specifically Casino Royale. And what I loved was they used that intro, that the prologue pre no, it's the start with the parkour sequence. And their
Right.
point was watching the parkour sequence sets up who James Bond in this film is going to be. He's the guy that doesn't jump over the wall, he breaks through it. And
Yeah.
that's like what I at least tried to do with the characters and even their alcohol choices was what does this say about them? Because every little decision, uh, even down to what people dress, the things that they use to decorate, thus books behind me, these are all little tells that tell us about the character themselves. I mean,
Right.
even you've got the crucifix on, like that and that role in the book work really well to illustrate the characters in your story.
That's actually a really good segue. Yeah, to the unsuspecting audience, there's a lot of themes of faith
Hmm.
in the Raider series. Yeah. It's going to especially come up in the second one. Um, but I'm personally, a Baptist, not as evangelical or as strict, but I do believe that faith overcomes a lot, and I wanted to, as controversial as it may be, um, I wanted to introduce that as a guiding force for the main character Jack Carter, and
Hmm.
there's a scene in there where he's at his lowest.
Hmm.
He just got to the island, but he beaches ashore. He thought that he's failed everyone, and there's no point. Like he's gonna die right up there on the island. But he is able to find his cross that was given to him, and that spiritual energy propels him into rogering up, getting back into the fight because he's sworn to defend the people that he loves, and he has a godly mission
Hmm.
to prevent bad things from happening in the world.
We recently had this conversation with Eric P. Bishop in his Omega Group series, the second book, Babylon Will Rise.
Mm.
He makes a few very, I wasn't, vague is the wrong word. He gives a very broad, people have to believe in something statements.
Mm-hmm.
And in the conversation with him, it's very similar. And just, I think that it's really easy. Even we were talking about this with our favorite heroes earlier in the conversation.
Right.
We stop as a culture, and I'm using this very broadly to describe Western civilization at this
Yeah, of
point,
course.
we have kind of started snubbing our noses at the idea of believing in things. We've stopped wanting to think of heroes. We've kind of looked at the institutions and tried tearing them down. When at
Right.
the end of the day, part of all of that is done to fill an insecurity in that we all desperately wish to cling to believe in something. And for the default for most of us is to believe in ourselves. And most of us can't do that either. And we're very, very frail idols to put our hopes on. And I think that it's really great to see concepts like that pop up in what is adventure fiction. And I think that's part of what makes a good adventure story is when it can transcend simply being, it isn't just a matter of a treasure and a chase. There's more heart to it than that.
Right. And I mean, yeah, without the bare bones of just the adventure, leads a lot of adventure stories to not go as well as they should have. Um, and you get that a lot with there's a TV show, um, Jack Hunter. It's on Amazon.
Mhm.
It's this very it tries to be this very Indiana Jones thing, but the characters are not
Mm.
they're not there, and the bare bones of the adventure should just be that, the bare bones. You need to be able to bring the spice, bring the flavor to the story that you're presenting, and you do it well because you have two characters. You have Dixon, which actually got me into Suits.
Oh, good. Yes.
Because I was like, yeah, okay. There's a little bit of the Harvey Specter influence
Mhm.
in there, but that dynamic between him and his brother Sam, and I took a look at the um, the casting that you had. You had like
Mm-hmm.
the cast kind of thing. Um, was that Chris Evans?
I threw Chris Evans in there. There's definitely a degree to which the guy that played Mike in the in Suits was kind of where I started, but I was like, I need someone more famous when I'm doing this, like my fan
Right.
casting. So Chris Evans works.
I got you. I got more. You'll have to excuse me, but I got more of a Jared Padalecki. Do you know something
Yes.
supernatural?
Yes. Oh my goodness. That's
It's
fantastic.
that
I'm
makes it
gonna
a
have to
little.
do a recasting. That's a great pick.
And yeah, he's more the homely, the the classical romantic type,
Hmm.
um, and that coercion between the brothers, and you got your Amy's and your Mallory's, um, and what was his name, Marks. He
Yes,
was
Captain Sebastian Max.
exactly. If these people were just 2D cutouts,
Hmm.
story wouldn't work. But the fact that everyone has their own motivations, their own
Hmm.
ticks, their
Hmm.
own quirks, um, really elevates the story. And I think that the characters in that make up the Raider team um, definitely have that cohesion
Hmm.
and character development.
I
That
think Maria might be my favorite character in the story,
yeah,
honestly. Just uh her when she kind of goes on her own adventure for a
Mhm.
bit, it's just again, it's very well written and I think I'm always just delighted when a good female character is written in a story and I don't find her off-putting. Like there's
Yeah,
always like a 50% chance often with a book that's published post 2019 that
yeah.
strong female character is going to be slightly obnoxious and off-putting. But again, to your credit, she's likable, she's well written, and she feels like a real person.
Oh yeah, I had a lot of fun with that. Um,
If you don't mind me asking, who would be your fan casting for the Raiders team?
ah, that's a good question. Because I've constantly been thinking about this because I would very much like to get this into a movie. So if anyone in the audience is a producer, please hit me up. Uh, but Jason Stray is, being the pinnacle of masculinity, and but also bring that southern charm and that charisma. I would say
Ooh, that works. That works really well.
Jensen Ackles or Jim Caviezel.
Mm.
When
Hmm.
he played in Sound of Freedom.
Hmm.
Have you ever seen that?
I still haven't seen it. I'm familiar with his work from because he was in Person of Interest.
Person of Interest, yeah. Sound of Freedom is a very rough movie to watch, especially if you have kids. Jesus.
That's what I heard, and which makes me feel bad because I almost went to it once, and someone was like, "Just so you know, like it's really tough." And I'm like, "Okay." And I looked at the thing, and I was like, "Maybe not."
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's not a graphic movie,
Hmm.
but everything that's in the subtext and the way Jim Caviezel acts in that, um, he's just honestly, it's Oscar worthy. But I know he's not going to get an Oscar for that kind of movie.
The
Um,
I feel like he just as a quick side comment, Jim Caviezel is like one of the most underrated actors I
oh,
think that
absolutely.
has been around. Played Jesus in Passion of the Christ,
Yeah.
and he plays. I'm a big fan of Count of Monte Cristo. He plays Edmond Dantes, the Count, in like 2004 adaptation,
Mhm.
and then he's just Person of Interest. He was incredible in it. He just played a great role.
Yeah, I've
So,
seen a
and
few
Sound
episodes
of
of
Freedom did amazing at the box office.
exactly, especially for the budget that they had. Um, I think it was only like 10, 20 million, which
Hmm.
is unheard of. Um,
So you're talking fan casting. So Jim Caviezel,
yeah.
Jensen Ackles for Jason.
And then Jack Carter is such a hard person to fan cast because there's
Hmm.
nobody. The closest I could get would be Tanner Buchanan from Cobra Kai.
Oh yes. Okay, actually that's pretty good.
I was like, because he's done, you know, he's a very physical actor. He can
Hmm.
very much do that. Um, I don't know if you'd be interested in this because if we were to film, I think it'd be a very almost Lord of the Rings style filming
Hmm.
or original Raiders, where I would very much like to go out into the jungles and film. But him as Jack Carter, and then for Maria, I'll get to Maria last.
Yeah.
Uh, Carlos, I can't remember his name, but he's on a show called On My Block, and he plays
Okay.
a very charismatic person. I don't know if you've seen that. And then Sal, I don't know who to, because there is a fan casting thing on my Instagram, and it was the other kid. His first name is Zo from Cobra Kai. He
Oh,
plays.
hmm.
Um,
Yes.
I think he could, really play a serious character. Um, but for Maria, I bounced around it. I think it'd be, I think it'd be hilarious if I did Rachel Zegler, but but no, she would not do this. But probably Isabella Merced.
I'm not familiar with her.
Um, she played in a lot of, let's see, rom coms. She was one of the smaller kids in the remake of Father of the Bride, but she's going
Oh,
to be
okay.
in the next season of Last of Us. She'll
Okay.
be somebody. I haven't played those games, so I don't exactly know who that character is, but I think she can, you know,
She has
she has
range.
that attitude and she
Yeah.
has that range that I think perfectly mimics Maria Gutierrez.
Hmm.
But for Cody Armano, I had this one locked in. Uh, Tom, oh my God, Draco from Harry Potter, Tom,
Oh, uh-huh.
because he's grown up now. And I think he'd play the perfect, just slimy, fake, woke.
Cody was such a fun, like having fun villains, I think is so underrated.
Right.
And he just hit that right notes of sincere and insincere that again, just it was phenomenal. I would be remiss in not asking about the sequel since I have yet to read it yet, but I am looking forward to reading it. Temple of Cyrus. Just can you give just a hint to the audience what's it about? Well, and me.
Of course. So I finally remembered it was Tom Felton, plays
Yes.
Draco Malfoy.
Hmm.
Uh, I totally didn't just look that up on my phone. Um, but so Temple of Cyrus, um, we didn't really get to this part, but the artifact that they ultimately find within Legend of Yamashita's treasure is something that's very reminiscent of the artifacts that Indiana Jones finds.
Hmm.
And it takes place in the modern time. And I asked the question, what would the world look like from a
Hmm.
global security, national security perspective as to the existence of artifacts as powerful as the Ark of the Covenant?
Hmm.
Um, and so it picks up, the prologue takes place in 2014, but it picks up in the first chapter. The President of the United States is seeing this footage from the helmet camera that's usually mounted on the Navy SEALs, and it's coming into the Situation Room, and there's panic. And the president, who's a woman, I didn't mention her name. She doesn't have a name. I
Hmm.
didn't want to get political or any of this stuff, but she has to come up with, what do we do now?
Hmm.
How do we make sure that this artifact or something like the Ark of the Covenant doesn't pop up in a New York subway or something like that, or in
Hmm.
Times Square and just massacre everybody? So she creates a special task force with a lot of the intelligence community forces, mainly the FBI and the CIA. And Jason Stray is head of the CIA's task force. And we also have a new character, Virgil Guzman, who's head of the FBI task force. And their first thing is they got to recruit the guys and girl that just took care of this mission in the Philippines in Legend of Yamashita's treasure. So the FBI gets Maria, and the CIA gets Jack, Carlos, and Sal. And it's their mission. It's the FBI's mission under with Maria Gutierrez doing the research to find out if there's any more paranormal antiquities that um, could pose a problem in the future. And she finds something, and it deals with Zoroastrian mythology. I
Hmm.
don't know if you're very well versed in that.
Just
It's
vaguely, but I think that just quick comment, that's where it's really cool writing stuff like this is now you have a great deal of familiarity with Zoroastrians.
exactly like I didn't know anything about Zoroastrianism before, but I so I you did a little bit of research. And the thing about the second book is it's a darker
Uh-huh.
it's a
It's your
bit,
Empire Strikes Back.
it's my Temple of Doom.
Ooh.
It's it's definitely, it deals with, they call them devas in
Hmm.
Zoroastrianism, but in in Christianity we call them demons.
Hmm.
It has to do with demonology, and it has to do with the trauma that was inflicted in the first book, and Jack Carter has to deal with that now, and he doesn't deal with it so well
Hmm.
initially. um, and since he doesn't deal with it so well, the demons that throughout the process of the story he is basically infected with,
Oh,
they
interesting.
um, they take over his mind a little bit. He's not possessed, but it's definitely
Hmm.
something that will torment him, and he wants to do this all by himself, but he needs to realize that relying on other people is what's going to help him out in the long run. And there's a few other characters that get introduced in that. One is Danny DeLuca, who I think you'll like. He's very much I kind of crafted them in the Jack Sparrow kind
Mm,
of manner. Um, and I think that, if I ever get to doing spinoffs, I'd probably do a spinoff on that. Um, but yeah, it's a darker book. It deals with the fallout from the first one. So if you haven't read the first one, you're going to be a little lost in the second. But it overcome like I had a lot more. There's a lot more emotional
hmm
writing on the second one. I don't want to get on a soapbox. It's not a therapy session, but I was definitely in a darker place,
hmm
uh, and I kind of let that flow out. And it's actually kind of therapeutic for me. Um,
I mean, why write if it can't be therapy?
exactly. In the first chapter of Legend of Yamashita's Treasure, it's a little vignette as to what Jack Carter was doing in the Marine Corps.
hmm
And the names of the other Marines were people that I'd served with. Um, and they passed away in 2022. And not by combat, but by other means.
Yeah.
But I guess I was in a dark place as well in 2022. That was a rough year because getting out of the military
hmm
is
I think that's something you depicted well in the book is that there is a transition. I've never been involved in the military myself. I've had family and friends that have.
right.
And from what I've heard slash seen, sometimes that transition from military life to civilian life can be a bit of a jarring transition. And I think you depicted well Jack Carter's transition as it felt very honest and real.
Definitely. And it's funny because no matter who you are in the military, whether or not you were like me and you didn't see combat or you didn't um you were in a very violent PTSD, you didn't have PTSD or anything like that. Being in honestly a society that's a meritocracy,
hmm
it's a very brotherhood.
hmm
um the friendships you make in the military, you see them all the time. um and then leaving that to go to civilian life and not having connections and no immediate purpose. I think it's challenging for everyone.
hmm
And I hope, I mean, if what you say is true, I hope that I was able to do that honestly and respectfully um, when it came to the transition into the military. And I hope that I honored, honestly, my friends that
hmm
didn't, that passed away in
hmm
22. I hope I did that respectfully and honorably. But I think that they kind of become immortalized in this book.
hmm
They become remembered.
hmm
So I just thought that was something
Yeah.
to add.
One thing that I think that, again, you do very well in your stories is there are some times where I read someone write about, oh, they have former military experience. They write the characters this way. And
Right.
then it feels like that's just a line item that they put in this character's backstory to explain why they do extraordinary things.
Right.
When reading your book, the military experience in the book feels very real and it doesn't it doesn't just feel trite or checking off a box. I think that you handled it very maturely in a
Mm-hmm.
way that rings true to the story and works well within the story, where it isn't just another hat on a hat or it isn't an excuse to explain why a character knows how to fire a gun.
Right.
So, for
And
what it's worth, I think that that part was phenomenally well written.
yeah, I mean, it's not, you get a lot of, again, ex-military characters who've seen action in the military and stuff like that. But Jack and Carlos, who were together at that point, they don't they don't see action. They are part of an elite unit in the Marine Corps, but that due to the organization of the military, uh,
Mm-hmm.
they don't report to the Special Operations Command. They report to the Marine Corps itself. And through that process, they don't go into as many combat missions as, say, SEAL Team 6 or the
Mm-hmm.
regular SEALs or the Green Berets or anything like that. Um, and that frustrates Jack. And that's when he gets out in the first place because he thinks that he can do a lot more with his life. And again, it's that hopeful optimism
Mm-hmm.
makes the reality of what happens when you venture off into doing new things. It doesn't necessarily mean going off to do new things is a bad thing, but anything worth doing has things and obstacles to overcome.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of things and obstacles to overcome, I'm curious, do you have a writing routine? And if so, what does it look like?
Um, now, um, I have since I have a 10-month-old um, son, uh, I have a full-time job. It's not the most glamorous job, but my writing routine basically consists of whenever Jack gets to bed.
Mm-hmm.
No, that might be 9, 10,
Mm-hmm.
usually on the weekends. As soon as he gets to bed, that's when the writing starts, and that's where the creative process starts. So yeah, I'll be a little tired, but
Mm-hmm.
slap some coffee on it, and that's where the writing process comes from. But back when creating um, the original versions, because I'm working on the third one, but
Mm-hmm.
when I created
Awesome.
Legend of Yamashita's Treasure and Temple of Cyrus, it was very much um, I think the fact that I didn't have a writing routine
Mm-hmm.
kind of made it a little bit more. It took a lot longer to do,
Mm-hmm.
but towards the end of the years, because Legend of Yamashita's Treasure was created in 2022. Towards the later half of the year, that's when I kind of got started, and any free time that I had, I was typing away at the computer. Same with Temple of Cyrus in 2023. Any free time I had, just tapping away on the computer.
Mm-hmm.
But I do prime myself a little bit. I'll watch um, a short trailer of a pulp adventure like Indiana
Uh-huh.
Jones, one of the Uncharted trailers, or I had a another influence that I get is from Mass Effect.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard
I
about
have
that.
just like the vaguest thought when I hear Mass Effect, my brain starts to like fill with a few images,
Mhm.
but I don't know that much about it.
Um, the writing in the first three games are is it's superb, and it definitely gives me the influence I need to create characters who, one, they're able to care about each other, and they're able to have a little bit more
Mhm.
dynamic um, when it comes to the character development. And the writers over at BioWare who created this have been inspirational as to creating characters of my own. Jason Stray, I don't know if anybody in the audience would know, would be a Paragon Shepherd.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. Basically, what that means is, in the game, you have options to decide whether or not to go um, the renegade option, which is, very very selfish, and then the Paragon option, which is more um, altruistic. Uh, Jason Stray is that altruistic version of that character in the game.
Hmm. I'll have to I'll have to check do a little research on Mass Effect and see if I can see the similarities now. Joe,
Yeah.
it has been a pleasure to have you on the show. Where
Well,
can
thank you
people
for having
go?
me.
Yeah, it's been a blast. Where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
Um, as of right now, I have an Instagram account that is the most active, and my books are all on Amazon. Temple of Cyrus is available on ebook and paperback. Legend of Yamashita's Treasures, paperback, ebook, and audiobook. So you can close your eyes
Mhm.
and pretend that you're in a movie. Um, so definitely, please feel free to check that out. And my Instagram is always open if anyone has any questions or would like to reach out to me.
Awesome. Well, I will link all of that in the show notes. It gets a
Excellent.
big 5-star rating from me. People should definitely check it out. Joe, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Terrence.
It's been a blast.